Only the extreme cases are shown here, the no reduction and 100% reduction. This is a more homogeneous system with equal permeability and ratio and permeability ratio of 2. But if the system becomes more heterogeneous with a permeability ratio of 5, the effect of residual oil saturation reduction on oil recovery goes down as compared to a homogeneous system. And when the permeability ratio becomes more, even the effect becomes more less. So till now the polymer was considered as a secondary flood in all the cases. Now if there was a water flood in operation before the polymer flood, that is polymer is injected as a tertiary flood, then what is its effect on oil recovery when compared when the residual oil saturation goes down? So this figure analyzes 4 cases, that is 1 pore volume delay, 2 pore volume, 5 and 10 pore volume delay. To follow this figure, if we take the case of 1 pore volume delay, the recovery result follows the water curve for maybe about 1.65 pore volume, and then we get an oil bank and it joins the corresponding reduction curve. So the 1 pore volume is associated with the water flood and 0.65 with the polymer propagating in the reservoir. So what we can see is whether a polymer is injected as a secondary flood or a tertiary flood, the effect it will have on the residual oil saturation reduction will be the same. The major conclusions are, if a polymer flood of viscous oil is able to decrease the residual oil saturation below that expected for a water flood, a significant amount of additional oil can be recovered, compared to the case where polymer does not reduce residual oil saturation. The impact of residual oil saturation reduction by a polymer flood on oil recovery is more pronounced in reservoirs where residual oil saturations are high at the start of polymer flooding. The impact of residual oil saturation reduction goes down with increasing degree of heterogeneity. And a polymer flood can be effective for recovery of viscous oils even if the reservoir is extensively water flooded before application of the polymer flood. I'd like to thank my advisor, Dr. Randy Sirak. I'm really fortunate to have worked under him, and my committee members, Dr. Engler and Dr. Chen, Dr. Robert Lee, and Kate. She really helped me the whole period of my masters. And Guain, the discussions I had with him regarding the fractional flow calculations were very instrumental in me completing my thesis. And Liu and Howard, they were my first friends in PRRC, and I really liked doing experiments with them. And Heidi for our support throughout. Thank you.
Okay, anybody can ask any question they want, and Karthik wants really tough questions, so whatever you want to ask him. Scared him, Karthik.
Ask him something in French and see if he answer.
Well, since nobody asked question, let me ask that. When we look at your assumption, right? You have a slide on the assumptions. I just wondering how good would that assumption be, and if you can rate with the works that you're doing.
Sorry?
On the assumptions, this is your assumption, things that you assume to do the calculation.
Yeah.
How good or how rational is this assumption?
Okay. These are basically the assumptions for carrying out the fractional flow. Now, capillary pressure after above a certain flow rate, the capillary pressure difference it will not be so significant. And for incorporating the fractional flow, we have to assume that polymer behaves like a Newtonian fluid. And as far as polymer retention balances the inaccessible pore volume, that means there is no effect of polymer retention or the inaccessible pore volume in my calculations. That is, if we see this figure, if there is polymer retention, then we have to start not from the origin, maybe from few points towards the left, taking the retention into consideration. So basically, I think the assumptions are reasonable to a certain extent, and yeah.
Let's just follow that a little bit. What if retention was bigger, much bigger than an accessible pore volume? Do you think that would change any of your results significantly?
Yeah.
How? If my retention is higher, what would it tend to? How would it change your results?
If my retention is higher, then maybe the system will become like more heterogeneous, because the polymerase will not be able to propagate certain regions, so will not be able to recover oil from those regions. So the results will not be accurate.
So you're saying that you would be less efficient in displacing oil from the less permeable zones?
No, from the zone where the polymerase, yeah, less permeable zone. Yeah.
What about the assumption that polymer behave as a Newtonian fluid?
We can't apply, I think, Darcy law if you don't think Newtonian assumption is not taken into account.
Because it's kind of, sure you have to take that into account, but it's strange to consider this as a Newtonian behavior.
Yeah, I accept that. But I really never studied into, like, never looked at if there is like a non-Newtonian behavior, what will happen to this. Never thought about it.
So you're saying your results you don't think they're going to be valid if you have a non-Newtonian fluid?
Maybe all these effects we are seeing are due to non-Newtonian behavior of polymer. That is possible. So this just gives a pretty brief idea of how it can affect the results if you believe it to be behaving like a Newtonian fluid.
What if it is non-Newtonian? What do you think will change from what you have, from the results that you've got?
Newtonian, I think the basic requirement is stress is directly proportional to strain. That should be the case for Newtonian. So if you consider it to be like a non-Newtonian, then it will not be proportional.
Okay, so we have two types of non-Newtonian fluids that people talk about. One is shear thinning, meaning that the viscosity goes down with increased velocity. The other is shear thickening, where the viscosity goes up with increased velocity. Pick one and let's say shear thinning. Do you think that will affect your results?
Shear thinning is
The viscosity goes down with increased flow
viscosity, right?
Fluid velocity or shear rate. Viscosity goes down with increased shear rate.
Okay. It goes down with shear rate. So if viscosity goes down with the shear rate, the mobility ratio will become more unfavorable, because we are losing the viscosity with the increase in the shear rate. So,
Well, the mobility ratio would go
up,
up
go up. Yeah.
if my velocity goes up, right? If my velocity goes down, my mobility ratio will become more favorable, right?
Yeah. So, if you lose the viscosity, maybe I can take a little time.
You know, I'd be impressed if you could answer that off the top of your head. And people from Imperial College and University of Texas got it wrong after years of thinking about it. So if you can't get it in 2 minutes, that's still okay.
I don't feel bad.